Mr. Chairman, there are 24 ayes and 16 noes.
The ayes have it, and the committee report as amended is ordered reported favorably to the House. I now recognize the ranking member, the gentleman from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pursuant to Clause 2L of Rule 11, I hereby give notice of intent to file dissenting views for the inclusion into the report.
The notice is duly noted. Members will have 2 days to submit views. The committee report will be reported as a single amendment in the nature of a substitute, incorporating all adopted amendments, and without objection, staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes. This concludes our business for today. Thanks to all of our members for attending. Without objection, the markup is adjourned.
And there you have it. The House Judiciary Committee voting just now to hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress. Carol Lee, more history made on Donald Trump's watch.
Yeah, and I think the question now is how far does all of this go? What do they do now? What else, to what we were talking about earlier, how much do the Democrats decide that the way to fight this is to just try to go toe-to-toe with the president? They haven't really, they seem to have been caught a little off guard by the way that the White House has decided to play this. And so it's not clear that they would have a strategy that's going to be effective when, as you were saying, we're trying to go up against somebody who's not playing by the rules, because Congress as an institution is its rules and procedures, and those are their weapons. This is a president that's shown that can be effective in tearing those down.
Let's just remind our viewers what this was about. This was about Congressman Nadler, and you talked about the court fight. I think it's important to remind our viewers before our viewers remind me. Congressman Nadler has taken some steps. I mean, one of the legal standards, if this ends up in court, this is all about Chairman Nadler's request for an unredacted copy of the Mueller report. This is all about transparency. This is all about that cover story that was told, which made the Justice Department's hill higher, the one they had to climb in terms of now trying to recapture some of their credibility by hiding that, by distorting that in Robert Mueller's view from the public. I think the imperative for Democrats grew. Today, the House Judiciary Committee voting to hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress for refusing to turn over an unredacted copy of the Mueller report. Go ahead.
For refusing to turn over the document, and also for not showing up. Actually, he was asked to come testify. He said he would come testify. He testified before Republican Lindsey Graham's committee, and then when it came time for the Democrats to question him on the House side, he said, I'm not showing up. So I think it's both about the documents. It's also about testimony. Where is this going? This is most certainly going to a full vote on the House floor, where I think probably you'll see a party line vote where the full House will hold Bill Barr in contempt. But this is kind of a warm-up for the larger issue, which is if there is a broader constitutional inquiry into the president's conduct, whether or not there were high crimes and misdemeanors, whether or not he abused his oath of office, whether or not he is abusing power, which is essentially the prelude to impeachment. If there are investigations, if there are hearings, will the executive branch play ball? Right now, the Trump administration's position is we're a banana republic. Unless you can physically drag somebody and sit them down in a chair, handcuff them behind their back, they're not going to answer your questions. There's no respect for the rule of law under that doctrine. So the president has basically said we're a banana republic. We're not participating in any constitutional order. And I think the Democrats are going to have to think about long and hard, is this a moment where that in itself is an obstruction? That in itself is an abuse of power that requires a constitutional reaction?
So I understand, and I agree with the analysis this is coming from the president, but who are the architects of the legal strategy? And we've talked a little bit about Emmett Flood this week because he's a member of the White House counsel's office who wrote a letter really trashing Robert Mueller's sort of conclusion of his investigation, where he refused to exonerate and refused to recommend charges. I mean, is it possible that the White House had demanded more from Mueller, that they wanted him to go so far as to offer that declination letter that ultimately came from Rod Rosenstein and William Barr?
I'm not sure if the White House wanted that, but there are two key architects in this executive privilege argument that you see the administration making. One is Emmett Flood, who's been working in the White House now for many months, very quietly preparing a legal framework for this very moment, to prepare for these executive privilege fights.
Why is he there? Who brought him there?
Well, he was brought in to help sort of take control of the Russia investigation and get things a little more orderly after the president's previous legal team.
And by orderly, you mean cover things up, button down the hatches. I mean, his legal
Correct.
pedigree is the aggressive exertion of executive privilege.
Exactly, and that's why he was so appealing to President Trump and appealing to Don McGahn, the White House counsel, previous White House counsel at the time, because the president's other attorneys were wanting to cooperate fully with Mueller, and in fact waived executive privilege to allow all of these officials, including Don McGahn, to testify with Mueller. But Emmett Flood is one key component. The other is a more public-facing person, Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel, who's been signing a lot of these letters, who's been doing a lot of the interactions with Congress, and they're really very aggressive in exerting executive privilege. They've been preparing for this for many months, and right now they're just sort of executing their strategy.
And who would have thought that those two men will have as their legacy looking more hardcore than John Yoo? I mean, that's where we are today. And just, you know, to sort of, again, explain the point of John Yoo's analysis, he was so extreme. He was sort of one of the most indefensible actors of the Bush years, not just for the substance of what he argued was legal, but for the aggressiveness with which he saw executive power. You've now got two gentlemen who are way out on the other side of the ledge from John Yoo. Wow.
And I think by the end of this fight, you will see two more: the Attorney General William Barr and Stephen Engel, the head of the Office of Legal Counsel, in the job or in the office that John Yoo worked in. Yoo wasn't the head, but he worked in that office. Who I suspect will be authoring very aggressive OLC opinions and very aggressive memos to the president about privileges that he can assert. That's the kind of formal mechanism that has to happen before the president can assert executive privilege. I think the four of them, by the end of this, are going to either succeed greatly in changing the balance of power forever, or they're going to fail. And it's ultimately going to become up to the courts to decide, because the aggressive stances that they're taking, if they are blessed by the courts, will forever change congressional oversight, could end congressional oversight. If it stands that you can just blow off a congressional subpoena, that you can assert executive privilege over anything. Remember what they did today. They didn't just assert executive privilege over a narrow scope of documents. They said it potentially applies to all the underlying documents in the Mueller report. Yeah, and witnesses, witnesses that can come up and testify. If that stands, those four individuals, I think, will be the architect of a change in the constitutional order in this country.
But can I just ask you guys a question? This is one thing I don't understand, which is, so the courts rule on this, and they order the executive branch to comply with a subpoena or to produce documents or testimony. What if the White House says no?
Exactly.
I mean, is this not a banana republic?
That's where you have your constitutional crisis. It's a fine order. What's the Andrew Jackson quote? Now let him enforce it.
But I mean, let me just press you. I mean, isn't that why taking impeachment off the table is like asking Democrats to go to battle in a banana republic with their hands tied behind their back? I mean, isn't that where the only thing Donald Trump is afraid of, I think, is the television production of impeachment. I don't actually think he's even afraid of impeachment. I was told by a former Republican Justice Department official 18 months ago that he was aware of Bill Clinton's poll numbers during impeachment, and basically his attitude was bring it on. He was at 67%. Never mind, Donald Trump has never and will never see 67%. But I think the idea of sort of the roadblock coverage that impeachment would bring terrifies Donald Trump. He watched Christine Blasey Ford and was so moved by her performance, never mind it was her telling of the most horrific moment of her life, that he was almost swayed on Kavanaugh. So I don't know that this is ever about what it should be about for Donald Trump. It's always about the show.
Yeah, and I think we have to understand that unless Congress is able to conduct oversight, perform its constitutional responsibilities, unless court orders are respected, unless injunctions, temporary restraining orders, judgments by courts of law are respected by the executive branch, we don't live in a democracy. We don't live in a constitutional republic. We just don't. Now, maybe that's Donald Trump's America, and it's an extreme way of putting it. But that is what is at stake here, Nicole.
So then why, if those are the stakes, why is impeachment such a hard question for Democrats?
Well, I don't think it's off the table forever for all Democrats. I think the question is, how far will the executive branch push Congress? But I think, Nicole, if there are contempt votes after contempt votes, if the executive branch does not comply with any judicial or congressional process, then I think Congress is going to have no choice but to investigate abuse of power, abuse of oath of office, and that's going to lead to impeachment hearings.
Phil, you have any faith that they're going to wake up tomorrow and say, here's one. What's this one for? Oh, this one's for children in jail. So yeah, we'll do this. I mean, what makes them turn the boat around?
I don't know that they're going to. But we should keep in mind that the Democrats are doing this because of the midterm elections in November. The American people had a popular mandate to have a check on this administration's power. There's an executive branch, there's a legislative branch, and the American people wanted a different party in charge of the legislative branch. That's the reason Jerry Nadler has the gavel, and that's why he's empowered to issue these subpoenas. So there's a sort of popular support and actual people in the country behind all of this.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.